Hi and welcome to AXSChat. I'm delighted to welcome Jay Ménard today, talking with us from London, Ontario. Jay is representing the Ability First coalition. So welcome, Jay. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Neil. Appreciate it.
So can you tell us a bit about Ability First and what it is that the coalition does?
Basically, the Ability First Coalition is a volunteer-based organization of companies within the London, Ontario area that work together to create an environment and facilitate discussions for hiring people with disabilities. Really, our goal is to get out there, tell the truths about hiring for people and the benefits for hiring for people with for Ability First, but also to challenge some of the misconceptions out there or in some of the falsehoods that have been spread. We really want to tell the truth, be a sounding board for people to come to us if they have questions, if they want to be involved in this type of hiring policy, and really support those endeavors.
Okay, that sounds great, and it's obviously something close to my heart. I work in a bit of the business that basically enables people to work, and we spend a lot of time looking at how we can facilitate people into work. Some of the stuff we do in the UK is based with the Business Disability Forum, which is a large national organisation with lots of big companies where we do pretty much the same kind of thing. Where we look at how we can dispel the myths, how we can share best practice, etc. So does Ability First work outside of Ontario, or is it just in the local area that you're focused?
Right now, we're focused on London, Ontario. We've done some presentations and work in the surrounding communities, but really, we're using this as a foundation for growth. We're seeing the coalition started in 2006. We're seeing slow and steady growth throughout. We've really, over the past few years, have seen the local community really embrace what we're trying to do. So ideally, we would like to see this type of coalition extend to different areas, but it really is important to have locals leading that. Ability First really is about local leadership driving that change, facilitating those discussions, and being trusted resources for other members of the business community.
Okay, I think that's a good point, and one of the things where we struggle is that we're dealing with large international organizations that basically it's harder to get small organizations involved and involved to the same kind of level. So I think what you're doing on a sort of grassroots level looks really interesting. So I know Debra's got a question.
And welcome, Jay, to our chat today. It sounds to me also similar to what we do in the United States with a group called the USBLN. And we have found in the United States that until we really got the employers and the businesses really engaged in the conversation, we really were not having a lot of, we weren't making a lot of strides here. And I know that that's what they found, you know, with the group that Neil was just mentioning. But it's so important that the employers, and I know sometimes employers are not always businesses, but the businesses and the employers really effectively join the conversation. So what does I know that you're a volunteer organization, and a lot of the USBLN, it's a national organization in the U.S., and then most of our states also have, we also have an organization. For example, in Virginia, where I live, we had the Virginia BLN. And so it was sort of part of the USBLN, so that we could really look at this from the perspective of what's happening in Virginia with our employers/businesses. Are you doing something like that, and who are some of the organizations that are involved in this?
Well, we really do focus on the discussion part of it and the information sharing. We make a clear distinction that we are not providing jobs for people, and we really don't help people find jobs. We rely very much on our partners. We have a wonderful organization here called Partners in Employment, which is a service provider organization that works with people with disabilities that are looking for jobs and helps them, support them in whatever way in their job search. we're there really to work with the broader community. So as representatives of businesses, I work for a company called Digital Echidna. We're a web design digital agency that is very invested in accessible web design and believes very strongly in those principles. We've had some great corporate support throughout, from the City of London itself to 3M Canada to the university here, Western University, to TD Canada Trust. Wonderful organizations that have really supported us both on a national and on a local level. But it is about creating that discussion. We're very lucky. There's the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act in Ontario that mandates a lot of these changes that we want to help people guide to. And so whether that's accessible hiring practices, whether it's internal corporate communications training, or whether it's information dissemination through websites, it's all about accessibility and being inclusive. That's part of the conversation we have. You mentioned earlier that it's very challenging for a lot of businesses, or small businesses. They feel it's challenging to support this. Our role is to help dispel those myths and to show that it's not a challenge, it's not an additional burden, it's just part and parcel of doing good business, and the benefits affect your bottom line in a positive way.
Yeah, I actually want to come back to that point. I think it's not so much challenging for the small businesses. I actually think it's probably easier for small businesses than large ones sometimes. I think it was difficult for small businesses to engage with very large ones.
Yes.
The members that form the organization that I'm part of, because it's very difficult to have a voice as a SME with less than 100 employees when you're dealing with companies that have maybe 50,000 employees, or so the disparity between the two makes it difficult.
And that's one of the things the coalition strives to do, is bring that voice of the small person. Digital Echidna, we're a company of just over 40 employers, and we have a very strong voice on the coalition, equal to companies like we say 3M and TD Canada Trust, that are multinationals with huge employer bases. But we all bring something to the table, and it's something that we really want to encourage. Whether it's somebody who's got a restaurant down the road that has 5 employees or 2 employees, everybody has a voice, everybody has an idea, and we really do want to encourage people to have those discussions and understand that this isn't a challenge, this isn't a burden, and it's certainly, I don't like the word accommodation in a lot of ways. We're not accommodating anybody. We really are helping people with the tools and resources they need to do their jobs effectively and to let their natural talents shine through.
Okay. Antonio, I know you had a question.
Yes, I do. When we talk about employment, we see that sometimes recruitment agencies are at the front line of the process. Can you tell us about what type of work are you doing with them to make sure that when they go to the recruitment process, they are actually to create an accessible recruitment process and they don't exclude anyone from the process?
Oh, actually, our co-chair on the Ability First Coalition is an employee at one of these agencies that you speak of. So it really is, that is first and foremost. We work with a number of agencies locally as well that are out there looking for jobs. The one off the top of my head is an organization called Leads that's been very supportive and very helpful of us. They're out there working with us to talk to employers and to spread our message. If there are questions, we like to be that resource for people coming back as well. So if there is a business that has been approached by somebody or an organization that's working with people with some sort of disability, and they come to us and say, you know what, we have questions, we have concerns, we want to be that person to provide, whether it's referral information or talk to peer organizations that have had success hiring for Ability First. It is about working with people. As I said before, we don't provide jobs for people. We don't help people find jobs. We facilitate that conversation, and we bring these organizations that all have similar goals. And for a business, the goal is to do well, to grow, and to expand, and to be successful. We know hiring for Ability First works. We work with these organizations to make sure that message gets through.
If you look to the beginning when Ability First started and today, are you able to establish, what progress can you establish between then and now in terms of the awareness that was generated in the local society?
I think one of the biggest things is that we're seeing a global consensus, and when I say global, I don't mean worldwide, but global in terms of the provincial perspective. We really are seeing, with the mandate of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, in the United States you have Section 508, there really is a focus for inclusivity and ensuring that accessibility is there. So while this was a nice to have for a lot of people, it's now a must have. And there's a lot of trepidation at times about what does this mean for my business? Is this going to impact us? And we have found that more people are willing to come and talk to us. They're very supportive of the endeavor. They want to be involved. A lot of times I'm just not sure how to be involved. That's something we're talking about internally with the coalition, is how do we expand that reach? How do we bring more businesses together? Because we really want to amplify that voice, and the only way we can do that is by sharing the success stories that we have. You know, we can talk about it later, but we have items like Tuesdays at 10, and we have the Champions Award, which is an annual event where we celebrate these people who have hired for Ability First, and we bring them together so those stories can be shared and experiences can be shared, and you learn from other people's experiences and successes.
Jay, I have a question, sort of a clarity question.
Yeah.
So I know that we have a lot of different organizations. We've mentioned the USBLN, we've mentioned the Business Forum, a network that Neil is part of in the UK, and I think it's interesting that you keep saying we don't hire people with disabilities, well, only because people are always assuming that about the work that we do as well. And one thing that I find, as I have done a lot of work and traveled around the world, including many times in Canada, is once again, if the employers are not engaged in a really powerful way, and I say employers, but make it even broader, business, to talk about things like Antonio just mentioned. What if your website is not accessible? You say that you're an employer of choice and you want to employ people with disabilities, but your website, career part of your website is not accessible. You're sending the wrong message. And so there's a lot of ways in the U.S., for example, you can get in trouble over that, and we're fighting pretty mightily over litigation right now in the U.S. But one thing I'm trying to understand about your model versus some of the models I'm more familiar with is I understand you bringing the businesses of all sizes, and I have been a small business for many years. Before that, I worked in very, very large multinational corporations. But as an entrepreneur, I've been a small business for years. I personally think small businesses need to be in these conversations, and sometimes it appears that it's easier for larger corporations. You have all of that, as Neil mentioned as well. But so if I am an employer or a business in Canada, and or in right there in Ontario where you're doing this, and I want to employ people with disabilities, how does your group help me?
Well,
just for example.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, just as an example.
What we will do is a lot of times it's about dispelling misconceptions. So there are a lot of ideas that, if we're going to hire somebody with a disability, there's going to be more frequent absenteeism. It's going to be too expensive for me to adapt my restaurant or my office to accommodate that person's needs. Again, I hate that term accommodation because it's not about that. Just no different than you having stand-up, sit-down desks, or you look at ergonomic workstations for all staff members. It is the same type of idea of helping people get what they need to do their job. What we will do is we are there to be that almost a hands-off resource, so we can say, we are business leaders in this community. We've gone through this. We've enjoyed success. We hear your concerns. Here's the facts that we have. Absenteeism is actually less. If you're concerned about turnover, which is a huge thing for a lot of small businesses because you invest a tremendous amount of resources in hiring and training people, that we have the statistics and we have the proof that shows that people with disabilities actually stay longer at jobs, and you don't have to deal with those retention, or the rehiring and those costs involved. So long term for your business, we want to focus on the bottom lines. hiring for Ability First makes good business sense. So that's what we try to do. And then if you're looking for somebody, if you've come and said, I have this position, is there anybody available that you can find? We work with our partners of employment, and we'll say, we have this type of position. Is there anybody within this group that you feel would benefit? Ideally, we want to work through that whole process because our goal is to make sure it's a good fit for everybody. Hiring for Ability First isn't just about doing the right thing. It's about ensuring that everybody succeeds. So if somebody hires somebody with a disability and has a poor experience because it's not the right fit, that's a negative long term. It's going to change their perspective on how they hire. We want to make sure that community or that integration works well, so that there is success, and this becomes, ideally, we want these people to become advocates for us and to be referring other businesses and said, you know what, I had trepidation, I had concerns. There were a lot of misconceptions that we had heard about. In talking with Ability First, we found that those misconceptions were wrong, and that when we brought somebody aboard, it was a tremendous value to our organization, and long term we enjoyed success. That's the best way we get the ball rolling. Once that momentum's going and people see success and see that businesses are hiring for Ability First, enjoying the benefits, they're going to tell other businesses, and that will spiral. And that's the type of community we want to create, where people aren't hired because they have a disability or because they don't, but they're hired for their ability first.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question real quick. So I understand what you're saying about accommodations, and I just want to give you a little bit of something to think about. So when I talk about accommodations, even though often when I'm interviewed or I'm asked questions about people that might not know it as well, I always remind employers that we accommodate employees all day long. And it's not just about disabilities. You accommodate the mother that wants to, coach soccer on Tuesdays at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You accommodate, the man who hurt his shoulder, and so he can only use one hand to type for 9 months. We accommodate employees because we want them to be productive and happy, and when employees are happy, they're more productive. So there's nothing wrong with accommodations, but I think there's a misnomer when we say, and I know you agree with me here, that it's just about people with disabilities, because it's not. Accommodations is making sure. Go ahead.
The negative connotation of accommodations, and that's the way a lot of times it's looked at. It's like, I have to accommodate, I have to go out of my way specifically for this group, which is not necessarily the case.
I agree.
And the conversation shouldn't stop at whatever you're doing to make your workplace or opportunity accessible. It should continue on to what benefits are we going to get. And I look at what we do at Digital Echidna. We're a web design digital agency. We've been very involved with accessible web design, but one of the things that we missed was that experiential aspect, and we brought aboard Sarah Jetnikar, who is our accessibility consultant. She's visually impaired. She's able to go through our websites, and not just from the dotting the I's and crossing the T's aspects of accessibility to make sure we've got all the check boxes done and that we're actually following the law, but she looks from a usability experience and says, you know what, you've done everything right, but for somebody who is using adaptive technology, this is a little awkward, or this doesn't seem to make sense. So we're able to provide a better product in the long term because we've brought aboard somebody who has a disability, who has the visual impairment, and that's what we want to show. It's not about, oh, we have to help do this, or we have to make this accessible, and that's a burden to us. That is not the case whatsoever. What we need to do is bring these people aboard, give them the tools they need to succeed, just like you would with any employee. And as you mentioned, I have a daughter, so sometimes I have to go pick her up at school.
Right.
It's an accommodation, or it's part of the job. You do what you can to make sure your employees are happy, successful, and have the tools and resources they need to do the job. And we want to make sure people see that so they can get to the next part of it, where they see the benefits that hiring for Ability First has.
Okay.
Right.
So I think that there's some interesting parallels with trends within workforce anyway, where certainly larger companies and also certainly in the technology industry, we're seeing a lot more flexible working. What we're talking about here is flexible working. We're just changing certain working practices to fit that employee's needs. I also read an article this week which made me stop and think about the whole concept of accommodations or adjustments or whatever. Someone was talking about coming out and talking about their dyslexia for the first time. It was an academic. It was an article in the Guardian, the UK newspaper, talking about how they were petrified about this, and also how that they felt that talking about accommodations was actually talking about the deficits rather than talking about personalization. So they were talking about the deficit model rather than looking at the ability, like you are, talking about what someone can give to the community or give to the business, rather than going, oh, well, you need help with this. Well, actually, what I need is certain things to be able to excel at this.
Absolutely. Right. And if you look at it from, say, somebody who doesn't have a disability, but maybe they prefer using a trackball mouse for whatever job they're doing because that improves their performance, or if they have certain scheduling needs or transportation requirements to get them where they need to go. It's not necessarily about, as you say, the deficiencies, because we don't want to look at that. There are technologies, there are workplace opportunities, there are practices and standards in place that you can adjust to ensure that everybody has their opportunity. And again, it's looking at the benefits, and that's really what we want to focus on with Ability First, and that's why we have the name Ability First. We want to focus on what the person can bring, what value can they add to their organization, independent of anything else. How do you make sure that their skills come through? How do you make sure that their abilities and their talents are allowed to shine? And then we work just like we would with any other employment or employee or employer. We work to make sure that they have the tools that they need to do the job to the best of their ability, just like you would do with any other employer, able-bodied or not.
Okay. So we're also in the age of bring your own device.
I'm sorry?
We're also in the age where of bring your own device. So a Braille note taker is just another BYOD piece of kit, and it freaks a few CIOs out that I talk to. But that's the case. They just bring their own device. It just happens.
Right. It is.
A few thousand pins in it. I think that once you start couching the changes that you want an employer to make into the language of business,
right,
it becomes a lot easier.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as a digital agency, we look at accessibility as best practices for a number of things, whether it's responsive web design, whether it's search engine optimization. Many of the principles that are involved with accessible web design translate into better business opportunities, content strategy, ability for people to find your information and interact with it. We live in an aging demographic, so there are a lot of the accessibility principles for people with disabilities also apply for people who are getting a little bit older, and maybe they don't have the double clicking time. So you have to look at things that, how do you slow down those items? How do you make sure that content is presentable to people who may have lower vision as they get older, or slower reflexes? So there's a lot of benefits that go beyond just the right thing to do, quote unquote, but are actually solid and valuable business building tools that can help with your overall business opportunity.
Yeah. So I'm interested. You talked about the fact that you've got case studies and everything else. Do you make these available on your website, or are you publishing them?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a number of sections on the website where we look at statistics. Really, we want people to come to our website, the businesses who have these questions, to have that sort of high-level discussion. And we do link to a number of resources that are out there, studies that have been presented. We have an entire section on myths and misconceptions where we kind of a top-level FAQ about the most common things that we hear from businesses that are preventing them from even engaging in the idea of hiring for Ability First. So we put those right up front and say, you know what, we know you've heard this. Here's the truth. We have a number of statistics when it comes to accommodation, employee turnover, job performance. A lot of the common terms that we hear from businesses of all size that are being presented as barriers to even considering the idea for hiring for Ability First, we just want to be right up front with them saying, we know what you've heard, here's the truth. If you want to know how this works for you, or if you want to have more of a discussion, contact us and let's get that going.
Excellent. Deborah, I know you've got another question.
Yes. So Jay, do you have partners that are service providers that if I'm a business and I come to you and I'm like, okay, I get it. I see all these great resources. I love how you're rewarding the businesses that are doing it because, quite frankly, as corporations, we like to get awards. It sort of validates our brand. It helps not validate our brand, but it's certainly good for our brand.
Yep.
So what if I want to hire people with disabilities? Do you have service providers that are partners that you can refer me to? It sounds like you're experts at your company on accessibility. So if I need to make sure my career site is accessible or my website, I can deal with some of the partners that are part of Ability First. But how is Ability First made up? Is it a nonprofit or an NGO? Do you have service providers? How do things like that work?
It is a nonprofit organization. It's made up of a volunteer board of coalition members who are people like myself or representatives from the various business communities who we dedicate a couple of hours of time a month for meetings. We have our events that we put out. We're actually in the midst of looking at how we're going to go forward for the next 2 years because we've reached a point where we feel we need to be more proactive with getting out and speaking to people and spreading this message. We've had a lot of excellent support from the members that we've already had from the businesses that we've featured on Tuesdays at 10 or in any publications that we've done. So we're looking at ways of spreading the message. We've had wonderful events. Every year we do the Champions Awards, as you alluded to, where we recognize businesses, small, medium-sized, and large, that have succeeded in hiring for Ability First. The great thing about those events is that the stories get told within the confines of that room. So there's 200, 300, 400 people who may get an idea, who may be inspired by somebody else's efforts. We have wonderful speakers come in that talk about the value that they've had personally, either as somebody with a disability or hiring, or in many cases both. And then what we do, as we said, we don't hire specifically, but we do try to provide supports. If you're interested in hiring for somebody with a disability, we have our partners of employment, which are service provider agencies that work with people with disabilities or work within those communities and can help. Really, they're the boots on the ground type. They're the ones that are out there, and once you've made this decision, and if there's a fit and a match that they can have, they will work with you, and they're very dedicated at ensuring that they're setting up both the business and the employee for success. Because as I mentioned before, that's the key. We want everybody to not just hire for Ability First, but to succeed in hiring for Ability First.
Well said.
Thank you.
So just one last question around these case studies. Are you also presenting local data that you've gathered yourself? Because I think that's really powerful. You talked about large pointing to other case studies and so on, but have you got members that are actually producing data that they're willing to share with the larger community?
We haven't yet gotten to that point. We're still very much at the anecdotal stage. So a lot of what we're doing is sharing success stories. It is something that we need to work on because we do want to have that hard and fast data. We have hard and fast data on a broader perspective, whether you're looking at national or provincial information or even international information. But if you're asking, do we have specific London data? At this point, we're not at that maturity level. We're trying to get there. That's something we're working for. But we don't have that pool of resources right now. We have statistics in regards to how many businesses have supported the coalition, that have attended events, that have reached out to us and contacted us. But that is something that long term, that's where we want to go. We want to make sure that people can see this is not just a concept that works elsewhere. It works in London. We are seeing it with our anecdotal reports and our success stories and our Tuesdays at 10s, but we haven't presented anything in terms of a formalized document with analytics and statistical analysis.
Okay, so that's something that I think Lloyds Bank did a really good job of in the UK. They produced a case study of how they'd managed to move from ad hoc adjustments to much more systematic way of doing stuff, and they've actually removed layers of bureaucracy. So rather than having to go through an assessment process, they just opened it up and allowed people to order stuff. And they reduced the lead times to people getting their equipment and adjustments significantly. They also reduced the average cost of the adjustments, and they've increased all of their employee retention rates and reduced sick time and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's...
And again, that's stuff we have anecdotally. We're getting that from our people. We have some wonderful businesses, small and large, that are telling us these stories. We just need to compile that information in something that is a little more has a little more rigor to it than right now. It's creating the discussion and creating that environment.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm sure I can find the link. It was done by the Business Disability Forum again. So Lloyd's they've published that whole case study, so it's publicly available. I'll try and make sure I publish it during AXSChat tomorrow night.
Thank you.
Yeah, along that lines, why we do things like this is a great opportunity, and on behalf of the Ability First Coalition, we do want to thank you for reaching out to us and allowing us this forum, because we really do want to spread the message of hiring for Ability First. We do, every month, we do something called Tuesdays at 10, which is a Twitter chat where we take some of our success stories, some of those businesses locally. Echidna has been a part of it. We've had a number of companies, large and small, that have participated in this. It's once a month on a Tuesday. Hashtag is hashtag TUES at, not the @ sign, but AT10. And basically what we're trying to do is get people to engage in this conversation and look at what you're doing and how people are, if they can ask those questions right online, kind of like we do with the AXSChat here, that immediacy of, I have a question, I've always wanted to know, can you just do this now? Because Twitter is a wonderful medium for disseminating that type of information, the immediacy and the interaction that you have. We can answer those questions, and people have been wonderful during these things to share their stories, but also to ask questions that we want to, even if we have to answer the same question 50 times over 50 chats, it's getting that message out and hopefully having that spread virally so that people are sharing the idea and the concept and seeing the benefit. And again, when we get back to employee recognition, there is value. I don't think any of the people that we work with are doing it because they want to be recognized for how great of people they are, how great of businesses they are. They do it because they believe in it, and that's wonderful. But if we can provide them with the added value of having that type of recognition, so that somebody who's sitting there, we have a frozen yogurt store that locally called Chill that was one of our Tuesdays at 10 participants. And if somebody sits there and says, you know what, I want to support that business long term because I believe in what they're doing and I support hiring for Ability First, then that's wonderful. That's great for everybody involved. And again, it comes down to that. Other companies are going to see that, oh, look at the recognition these people are getting, look at what they're doing, we support that, we want to be part of that as well. And it's just, as you said, it's a horrible part of business, when you say, are you doing things for recognition? I don't think most people are, but it is nice to receive it when you get it.
I agree. And let the economics drive it.
Absolutely. It's like anything. If you're not going to hire for Ability First, and that doesn't have to mean tokenism. It doesn't have to mean that you put somebody with a disability on display up front. But if you're open to it, even if it's about opening up your job opportunities to the people with disabilities and letting people know right up front, we hire for Ability First, or we hire people with disabilities. That is a very powerful message that you can send out to people in the community who may not see themselves reflected in job opportunities. They may be discouraged by the lack of opportunities. If you're showing as a business owner or a hiring manager that you're willing to hire for Ability First and you're willing to make whatever tools or resources available to those people who are applying, that's a powerful message. And I think it's something that resonates within the community.
I agree.
Excellent. So I think we've actually reached the end of our half hour. So I'd like to thank you very much. It's been great to have you on. We look forward to you joining us on Twitter.
Well, again, thank you so much for having us on. We really do appreciate it. We encourage people to to visit our website at as often as they can. If there's any local people who are interested in joining the coalition, we'd love to support that, and we'll speak for them. If there are anybody who's interested in starting up an Ability First chapter elsewhere around the world, we're happy to share our resources and our experiences with people, because this isn't proprietary. This isn't something that we're going to make money off of. We just want to make sure that the message is spread in London, in Ontario, Canada, and across the world. So if there's anything we can do to support hiring for Ability First, we're there.
Thank you. That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.